What's up guys? Today we're going to be setting up and giving the NAD M10 streaming amplifier a listen. Now before we get into it, if you love audio and video gear like this NAD, then be sure you tap that subscribe button for new weekly videos. The M10 retails for $27.50 at the time of this video. If the packaging looks a little rough, that's because it's already been to probably a dozen reviewers already. Inside the box we get some cleaning instructions, 2 power cords, and a calibration microphone for DIRAC live room correction. Now I think the M10 falls in the lifestyle audiophile category. It's a lightweight piece of hardware and small enough to be placed almost anywhere without drawing too much attention to itself. It weighs only 11 pounds and measures in at 8.5 inches wide by 3 15/16 inches high by 10 1/4 inches deep. It's using N-core amplification, which is class D. It's rated at 100 watts per channel into 8 ohms with dynamic power up to 160 watts or 300 watts into 4 ohms. Around back we have a trigger and an IR input, 2 unbalanced RCA inputs, a set of RCA pre-outs, 2 subwoofer outputs, an optical input, 1 HDMI input with support for ARC if you want to hook it up to your television. There's a LAN and USB ins, and of course you have binding posts for the speaker outputs. Build quality wise, it's got a very elegant minimal design. It feels premium with its aluminum enclosure accented by a smooth Gorilla Glass top plate. Up front you'll find the color touchscreen, which takes up the entire front fascia. For setup, I'll be using my usual AudioQuest cables and the Martin Logan ESLX speakers. I know what you might be thinking, the NAD might not have enough juice to make the electrostats sound good. Well, let's get it set up and find out. When you first power it on, it's going to take a couple minutes to boot up. While it's doing that, just go ahead and download the BlueOS app in the App Store. You can get it for Android, but I'll be using the iOS version on the iPad. When you open the app, it's going to look for any players on your network, and the M10 should show up. Here it'll bring up your network settings through AirPlay, and it should connect automatically. When that's done, it should kick you into the app. Now let's check out some of the settings. Here you can set up alarms if you want to use this as a very expensive alarm clock. There's a sleep timer. Under player you have your Wi-Fi settings, which we did earlier. For room name, you can rename the M10 if you want. For customized sources, you have settings for Bluetooth. For analog, you can rename the input, and there's also an adjustable delay, and you can even hide it from the menu if you're not using it. For HDMI, you can turn auto sense on or off, so if it senses the HDMI input is active, it'll automatically switch to it. And you also have some adjustable delay as well. Now onto the audio settings. Here you can turn tone controls on or off if you want to adjust the treble and bass controls manually. And here you can specify any subwoofers that you have connected to it. You can also adjust crossover for the subs between 40 and 200 Hz. Replay gain will adjust the volume level for each track either by individual tracks or the entire album. For output mode, you can select stereo, left, right, or mono, and you can set volume limits. Here's a section if you're using this with a compatible BlueOS remote, and you can also teach the M10 to be controlled by any spare remote you might have lying around. Click on the function you want controlled and hit a button on the remote while pointing it at the M10 to teach it that button press. Go straight down the list and now you have a fully functioning remote without having to rely on the app. Indicator brightness changes the brightness of the NAD logo on the top of the M10. Amplifier standby, you can turn on or off. You can make a backup of your playlist here on a USB drive if you want. LCD brightness changes the touchscreen's brightness. LCD temporary display will turn off the screen after 60 seconds from the last touch, and LCD volume percent will show the volume level as either percentage or in dB. And that's it for the player settings. For music library, which I don't have any set up, you can search for it here, index your collection, or reload artwork. And that's pretty much for settings. Now, since I don't have any music on my network, let's add a music service. As you can see, it's got support for a bunch of providers. I personally use Qobuz and Tidal, so I'm going to go ahead and add those here. Before I added the M10 to my system, I was running the Martin Logans with a Cambridge Audio Edge setup. I was used to a very full, aromatic sound from the Class A AB Edge amplifier. The Cambridge setup cost a few grand more than the NAD, so I went in expecting a ton of shortcomings. Now don't judge me, I didn't go into this review playing some esoteric recordings or anything from the Eagles. As I mentioned earlier, I think the M10 is a lifestyle product that the entire family should be able to use. And in my household, that means a lot of rap and pop music. I did play the new album from Justin Bieber on Tidal, some tracks from The Weeknd, some old school rap from A Tribe Called Quest, and of course some Biggie. All of these albums have some pretty good bass extension. I know what these electro stats are capable of, and I gotta be honest, after a few months with the NAD, I found little differences between the more expensive Cambridge preamp and amplifier setup. Low-end response went surprisingly deep for such a small little amp. Of course, it didn't quite have the same authority or extension as the bigger Edge amp, but it was satisfactory nonetheless. If I wasn't pushing the M10 hard, I think you would be hard-pressed to even tell this was a small Class D setup. Upper and mid bass was tight and articulate and really carried some chesty weight, which is something I need when I'm listening to all this pop music. Next, I threw in a little Billie Eilish, some Nirvana unplugged, and one of my new favorite movie soundtracks, Joker. Soundstage and imaging was audibly excellent. Instrumental placement in space was nearly tangible if I closed my eyes. The upper end had a sparkly, warm, crispy touch with some impressive air. I did, however, find depth and soundstage width wasn't as spacious as the previous setup, as I found it slightly more shallow and pulled in. I really don't think you'd be buying this for critical listening, but if you are and haven't heard a quote-unquote higher-end setup before, then this might just be the perfect all-in-one. Now those albums were streamed using either Qobuz or Tidal since they can stream in high-res and MQA. But I did also try out some Bluetooth streaming from my phone. If your speakers are resolving enough, you will hear how compressed Bluetooth can sound. I suppose if you had some friends over and didn't want to share your Wi-Fi password, you could just have them listen over Bluetooth for a quick fix. I should also mention the M10 does come equipped with DIRAC room correction. I'm used to hearing what benefits DIRAC can do for a home theater, so I was very interested to see how it does for a 2-channel system. To use DIRAC, you can use the included microphone with an app on iOS or on Android. I decided to use my PC and my UMic 1 microphone. Once you open the program, you'll have to select your mic and move on to the volume calibration. You'll have to hit the play button and move the volume slider till you're in the green. Next, you'll have to choose your seating arrangement. Focused is up to 13 measurement points, wide is 17 points, and tightly focused is 9, which is what I'll be using. Next, you'll have to arrange your microphone so it matches the picture. Hit the measurement button and it'll go through a few test tones. When you move the mic to the next position, it's recommended you keep it between 15 and 24 inches apart. The whole measurement process took me about 15 minutes for all 9 positions. When it's all finished, you'll end up with a graph like this. You can keep the DIRAC default measurement, which in my case was from 17 to 13.9 kHz, or you can limit it to your own preference. I hear it's recommended to only correct up to 300 Hz and let your speakers perform as they would normally above that. So just to test, I used the default curve up to 13K and I tried a separate one up to 300 Hz. I also took measurements with 2 subwoofers and without subwoofers. Once you're ready, click Proceed to export and choose an available slot. You will have up to 5 slots so you can switch measurements on the fly for comparisons. Now after you get all your measurements done, all you have to do is go into the app and now you can select whichever measurement you want. It takes about a half a second or so to switch between each measurement. After doing some comparisons, I found limiting the measurement up to 300 Hz made a noticeable change in bass. It wasn't as boomy as before, but more controlled and more precise. The boominess can sound decent for some rap and pop music, so your mileage may vary there. When I used the default measurement up to 13K, I heard a pretty significant difference in the cleanliness of the sound. It almost seemed like my speaker sounded dirty before I took measurements. After I selected the default curve, everything just snapped into place. Notes were cleaner, vocals were more distinct, and there appeared to be a veil that lifted over the entire soundstage. It all sounded so much cleaner. I thought the M10 sounded great before, but now I think it just sounds awesome. I can't lie, I preferred how this sounded over the more expensive Cambridge setup now. When I added subwoofers into the mix, it just rounds out the whole experience. Now at the time of this video, the DIRAC bass module wasn't available, so both subwoofers are corrected as one rather than individually. Now before doing your measurements, it's a good idea to get your placement right and try to blend your subs together as good as possible beforehand. The SVS subs that I have on hand have their own DSP, so getting them dialed in wasn't too hard. Let's talk about who I think this piece is for. I'm not so sure it's for the die-hard audiophile that needs a preamp and a stack of amps. I see this falling into the lifestyle category of audio. It's something your entire family should be able to use quite easily. If you know how to operate a smartphone, then powering on the M10 and playing a song should be a breeze. Ease of use gets top marks because it's super simple to function. If there's one negative aspect, I guess it could be the price. But I mean, this thing performed as good as a system that cost almost 3 times its asking price, so that should mean something. It sounds fantastic straight out of the box, but if you want to take the time to use DIRAC, then it'll sound amazing. I can't recommend the M10 enough if you're looking for an all-in-one audio solution. It was our favorite audio product of 2019, and I'm not sure what's going to top it in 2020. Oh wait, they announced the M33, didn't they? So tell us your thoughts on the M10. Have you heard it, or do you own it? And how do you think it sounds? Leave a comment down below. As always guys, thanks for watching. Be sure to follow us on social media, like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you guys again in the next one.